Have you ever felt like your own family turned their backs on you? Like you were erased from their story, even while you were still here? This is a story about that kind of betrayal, but also about the incredible power of truth and resilience. It's a story about coming back from nothing, armed with the one thing they never expected. If you believe in karma, if you believe that what goes around comes around, then you're in the right place. This story is for you. And if you've ever felt the sting of injustice, then I know you'll understand. So, before we dive in, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Let's connect. 9 years ago, I didn't just leave my family, I vanished from their lives. It wasn't a physical disappearance, not in the dramatic movie sense. I was still breathing, still going through the motions of life. But to them, it was as if I'd ceased to exist. There were no frantic search parties, no worried phone calls, not even the whisper of my name in their conversations. It was a chilling kind of silence. It all started with a lie, a subtle accusation masked in polite concern. A missing check from the family trust, then another. And somehow, all eyes turned to me. My stepmother, Vivian, she had a knack for delivering cruelty with a smile. "She's troubled," she'd say to my father, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Maybe she needs help or distance." And my father, Franklin Stone, a man whose word was law, whose decisions were final, he didn't even bother to look me in the eye. I remember the day he signed the papers that cut me off from the family business, from everything they held dear. There was no trial, no attempt to find the truth, just erasure. I tried to explain, to defend myself. But he just cut me off. "Let's not make this harder than it has to be," he said. His words were like a door slamming shut, a final rejection. So I left. One suitcase, a heart full of hurt, and the echoes of their indifference in my ears. I walked out of the house I'd grown up in, the one with the creaky floorboards and the initials I'd carved into the third-floor window as a child. No one followed. Not for a week, not for a month, not for 9 long, agonizing years. I built a new life, piece by painful piece, in the shadows. I was never truly whole, but I was also never broken enough to forget. They didn't know where I was, and I made damn sure it stayed that way. Until last winter. A letter arrived, old, yellowed, handed to me by a man I hadn't seen or heard from in decades. Arthur Jenkins, my grandfather's old lawyer. Inside was a sentence that changed everything. "Your grandfather never removed you. In fact, he left you the deed." Just like that, I wasn't the forgotten one anymore. I was the owner. It came on a Tuesday, that letter. No return address, just my name, Alana Stone, written in elegant cursive, like a message from a past life. For a moment, I thought it was a cruel joke, or worse, a trap. But something deep inside told me to open it. The paper was thick, cream-colored, with a weight that felt significant. And the signature at the bottom sent a shiver of disbelief down my spine. Arthur Jenkins. The last person, aside from my grandfather, who had treated me like a human being, not a problem. I hadn't heard that name since I was 19. The letter read, "Miss Stone, I apologize for the lateness of this delivery. Your grandfather left instructions that this document only be shared in the event of a legal challenge or after 9 full years of your absence." Attached was a certified copy of the deed to the Stone estate. I was its sole beneficiary. The deed superseded all prior claims or transfers. I read it 3 times, my fingers numb with shock. The Stone estate, the very property they had accused me of trying to steal, the house they had banished me from, it was mine. There was no if in the letter, no room for doubt. Just legal certainty, backed by seals and signatures. I called the number at the bottom of the letter. Jenkins' voice was old but firm. "I kept my word to your grandfather," he said. "He wanted you protected." Protected. No one had protected me in 9 years. But suddenly, I had leverage. Not just a legal document, but the deed. The one thing I knew they couldn't ignore. Not Franklin, not Vivian, not the family that had rewritten history without me. I didn't give them any warning. No emails, no phone calls, no polite RSVP to their annual winter gala at the estate, the same event I used to help plan, down to the smallest detail. This year, I wasn't invited, but I was coming anyway. I took the first flight. No luggage, just a folder of legal documents and a coat the color of the January sky, slate gray, clean, unreadable. When I arrived at the gates, the security guard didn't recognize me. I didn't blame him. 9 years and 3 cities later, I barely recognized myself. "I'm Alana Stone," I said. He blinked. "Ma'am, the guest list is irrelevant," I replied, and handed him the deed. It took him only a glance. His posture changed instantly. He pressed the button, and the gate creaked open. I walked up the winding driveway, the snow crunching under my boots like breaking glass. Lights twinkled inside the mansion, crystal chandeliers, champagne flutes, silk dresses. It looked just like it used to, except this time, I was the unexpected guest. I slipped through a side entrance. At first, no one noticed me. I stood near the fireplace, just beyond the edge of their awareness, until a champagne glass shattered on the marble floor. My cousin, Maya, the only one who ever had a decent heart, froze pale. Her eyes widened as she whispered my name. "Alana?" A hush fell over the room. Heads turned, voices dropped. And then, from across the room, Vivian appeared, clutching her pearls, her smile a fraction too late. "Darling," she purred, her voice dripping with false surprise, "we didn't know you were coming." I smiled, a small, tight smile. The room held its breath. My presence was a splinter under their skin, small but sharp enough to ruin their perfect evening. Franklin stood at the bar, whiskey in hand, frozen mid-pour. He looked at me with the same cold calculation he had 9 years ago, as if I were a problem he couldn't solve. Vivian crossed the room, her heels clicking on the floor like the ticking of a bomb. She stopped in front of me, her eyes wide and glossy with fake warmth. "My God, Alana, you look so well," she said, her voice dripping with sugar and venom. How unexpected. I didn't respond to her theatrics. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the folder. Thick cream paper, official stamps, gold seal. I placed it on the antique piano with a quiet finality that was louder than any shouting. "This," I said, my voice clear and steady, "is the deed to this estate. It bears my name and my grandfather's signature. Dated, certified, unaltered." Vivian blinked rapidly. Franklin stepped forward, slowly. He picked up the folder, flipped through it, his face paling. He stared at Jenkins' signature, the notary seal, the attached letter of instruction. Silence descended, heavy and thick. A guest coughed nervously. Someone whispered, "Is this real?" Maya hovered behind me, trembling. Vivian recovered first. "Darling, this can't be legal. There must be some misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding." I cut in, my voice calm but sharp as a knife. "You live here because I allow it. Starting tonight, that changes." Franklin's voice finally emerged, gravelly and low. "Why are you doing this?" I met his gaze, my own steady and unwavering. "You taught me to survive silence, Father. Now, I'm teaching you what it sounds like when I speak." They didn't erupt in anger. They strategized. The moment I turned to leave the room, Vivian's voice dropped to a whisper. She clutched the deed as if it would burn her, her eyes darting around for allies. Within minutes, their family lawyer, a Mr. Conrad Davies, was on speakerphone in the study. "She forged it," Vivian hissed. "She must have found one of Arthur's old documents and doctored the rest." Franklin didn't speak. He just nodded, his lips pressed into a thin line, rage simmering just beneath the surface. From the hallway, I heard every word. I stepped into the doorway, a ghost refusing to be ignored. "Still accusing me of forgery?" I said quietly. "You did that 9 years ago. Want to try something new?" Davies' voice crackled through the speaker. "Miss Stone, unless you can produce the original, this deed won't hold up." I placed a second folder on the desk. Arthur Jenkins had the foresight to keep 2 originals, one in a fireproof safe, the other delivered to me by hand. Their faces fell. Maya, who had followed me, broke the silence. "It's real. I've seen the seals." This isn't a stunt. Vivian's mask completely shattered. You think this makes you powerful? This estate is our home. We built it. I didn't flinch. You built facades, I replied. Grandfather built a legacy. He knew the difference. That's when they changed their tactics again. Vivian reached for me, placing a hand on mine as if we were close. We've all changed, Alana. We've matured. Let's talk this out. I pull my hand away. If you wanted to talk, you would have answered the first letter or the 10th. Franklin rose to his full height. You're making a mistake. I met his gaze, calm and certain. I made one once. I walked away. This time, I came with the deed. The storm outside had quieted to a hush, but inside, something in me was still raging. After the confrontation, I slipped away from the estate and took a cab into town, to the cemetery, to my grandfather's grave. There was no one else around, just snow-dusted headstones and a silence so thick you could taste it. I knelt down, my breath hanging in the cold air like a secret. I kept quiet, like you taught me, I whispered. I stayed strong when they tried to break me, but now I need more than silence. In my coat pocket, I clutched the envelope Jenkins had given me, marked, to be opened alone. Inside were 3 things. A handwritten letter from my grandfather, dated just weeks before he died. A photograph of me as a child, sitting on his lap, both of us laughing under the old oak tree.
And a key.
The letter read, "They've changed, Alana. Or maybe they were always like this, and I just refused to see it. But you always listened. You saw people, even when they tried to ignore you." Vivian has been rewriting the narrative. She's convinced your father I was losing my mind, that you manipulated me. But this key opens the safe in my office. What's inside proves who tried to erase you. I returned to the estate before dawn. Everyone was asleep or pretending to be. I found the safe in my grandfather's office and unlocked it. Inside were bank statements with missing funds, a forged letter attempting to remove me from the will, signed in Vivian's handwriting but notarized by a disbarred family friend, and audio tapes, recordings of her coaching the staff on how to quietly phase me out. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply stacked the papers, rewound the tapes, and walked upstairs. It wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine anymore. It was about exposing what they had tried to bury. The estate dinner began like a scene from a magazine. Crystal glasses, a string quartet, smiling guests sipping expensive wine beneath chandeliers I had polished as a child. Everyone who mattered, or thought they did, was there: family, friends, business partners, legacy leechers. And at the center, Franklin Stone stood to make his toast, his silver cufflinks glinting under the soft light. I waited until the wine had been poured, until the forks had stilled. Then, I rose from my seat at the far end of the long oak table, the one they had placed me at to keep me quiet. My voice, when it came, wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. I'd like to say something. Chairs shifted, eyebrows lifted. Franklin's jaw tightened. Vivian set her glass down without drinking. I walked slowly to the head of the table, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor like the countdown to an explosion. I placed a small speaker in the center and pressed play. The voice that filled the room was gravelly, familiar, and undeniably my grandfather's. "If they find this, Alana, it means they tried to erase you again. But I left this recording because the truth deserves daylight. You are the rightful heir to this home. Not because of blood, but because of integrity." Gasps filled the silence. I held up a folder and began handing copies down the table. Page after page of financial records, notarized statements, and the forged letter Vivian thought had disappeared. "You said I was unstable, that I stole from you, that I didn't belong." I said, my voice calm but firm. "But the truth is, you were afraid of what I inherited. Not money, not land, but memory." Vivian stood up, her eyes flashing. "This is a performance." "No," I interrupted. "That was your specialty." I turned to Franklin. "You knew, or you didn't want to know. Either way, you watched them exile your daughter because it was easier than facing what your wife really was." A phone camera clicked. Another guest whispered, "She owns the estate." Someone else said, "This will go viral." Franklin's hand trembled. He sat down without a word. Vivian walked out, no pearls, no defense, just silence. I didn't smile, not yet. But I felt something loosen in my chest, the first breath in years that didn't feel borrowed. They didn't try to stop me as I left. Not Franklin, not Vivian, not the cousins who had once laughed as I was forced to pack my things and leave in the middle of the night, without a car. The same driveway they had watched me walk down in shame, I walked back up in silence. And this time I didn't knock. The next morning, I returned with the estate manager, Mrs. Hayes, a woman who had worked there since I was 5. She met me at the side door, her hands twisting her apron. "I always knew you'd come back," she whispered. "I didn't," I replied, handing her a new contract. "But I'm here now." In the sunroom, Franklin sat alone, his robe rumpled, his face unreadable. He looked older than I remembered, smaller. "I suppose this is where you ask us to leave," he said, without lifting his eyes. I shook my head. "No, not yet." His brow lifted just barely. "I want a few things moved out of storage," I said. "The swing from the backyard, my mother's records, and my name. Put it back on the house title where it always belonged." He didn't protest. He just nodded slowly, and for the first time in my life, he said something honest. "You were always the strongest. We just didn't know how to love that." I didn't answer. There was nothing left to prove, only things to build. The ceasefire didn't last long. 3 days after the dinner, I received a letter, thick, embossed, dripping with arrogance. Franklin and Vivian were petitioning to contest the deed in probate court, claiming undue influence, mental decline, and fraudulent reinstatement. They were grasping at straws. Their attorney was new, flashy, and loud. He sent over an aggressive notice, demanding a deposition and a temporary hold on the estate transfer. I didn't flinch. I had already retained Alex Monroe, a brilliant litigator who had once dismantled a billion-dollar real estate empire in court, and did it all wearing ballet flats. She read the letter, smiled, and said, "Let them come." In court, it didn't take long. The audio tapes, the 2 original deeds, Jenkins' sworn affidavit, even Vivian's recorded voice instructing the staff to keep me out, the evidence was overwhelming. The judge's ruling was swift and brutal. The court finds the actions of the respondents to be both fraudulent and malicious in intent. The deed stands. Sole ownership remains with Miss Alana Stone. Outside the courtroom, the press swarmed. A reporter shouted, "Miss Stone, will you be pressing charges?" I paused. No. I'm not here for revenge. But I wasn't there for reconciliation either. Franklin didn't look at me as they walked out. Vivian did, and for the first time, she looked afraid. Not of being exposed, but of being irrelevant. I didn't follow them. I had a home to return to, one they no longer belonged in. The offers came in faster than the lawsuits. Developers, luxury hotel chains, historical trusts, all eager to get their hands on the Stone estate, now that it had made headlines. One proposal came in at $18.7 million, with promises of preserving the architectural soul while turning the house into a retreat center for CEOs. I didn't even finish reading it, because what they wanted was the house. But what I had taken back was history. I walked the halls one morning, a cup of black coffee in hand, just like my mother used to drink it. She'd play jazz on the old record player and hum along while folding laundry in the sunroom. Her old records were still in storage, dusty but intact. I had them cleaned, cataloged, and restored. The house started to hum again. And then, I did something no one expected. I opened one wing of the estate to serve as a women's refuge, named in my mother's honor, the Eleanor Wing. For women who had been cut off, discarded, erased. The plaque out front reads, "To those who were told to disappear, you deserve doors that open." Franklin never visited. Vivian sent one last letter and signed, just a check. I donated it to the shelter and mailed the receipt back. Some things can't be bought and some homes can't be sold. The estate didn't need new marble or rebranding. It needed memory. And I remembered everything. The newspapers moved on. The lawsuits ended, But my story, the real one, was only just beginning. I wasn't the same woman who had walked out 9 years ago with a suitcase and shame stitched into her spine. That Alana had been erased. This one rewrote herself. I started small, restoring the kitchen tiles by hand. They still had flour stains in the grout from the last pie my mother ever baked. The first time I knelt down to clean them, I cried. Not out of grief, but relief. Because I was finally allowed to remember her in color. Word spread about the Eleanor wing. Donations came in, volunteers followed. One of them was Maya. She brought coffee every Sunday and never asked for recognition. "You never said thank you," she joked once. "I didn't have to," I said. "You stayed when it mattered." I hosted my first dinner at the estate the following winter. Not a gala, not a fundraiser, just a long table, good food, and people who saw me as Alana, not a headline. At the end of the night, someone asked if I ever missed them, the people who had cast me out. I looked toward the window, where snow fell just like it did the night I returned. "No," I said. "I don't miss ghosts." And I smiled, and this time it was real. The snow had started again, soft this time, like forgiveness if you believed in that kind of thing. I stood beneath the old oak tree in the back garden, the one my grandfather had planted the day I was born. Its branches still bent toward the earth, as if it had been waiting for me all this time. The wind was cold, but I didn't pull my coat tighter. I wanted to feel everything. They buried me in silence, but I returned with truth. Not to shame them, not to impress them, just to remind them, and myself, that erasure only works if you let it. I didn't come back to reclaim a house. I came back to become someone no one could ever steal again. The kind of woman who doesn't need a seat at their table because she's building her own. The kind of woman who knows legacy isn't marble or money. It's what you leave standing after everyone else walks away. You don't have to burn bridges to move on. Some of us just outgrow what was never meant to hold us. They never expected to see me again. But I didn't come back for them. I came with the deed.